සියලුම SLT මොබිටෙල් සේවාවන් My SLT ඇප් එක හරහා කරගන්න. සියලුම SLT මොබිටෙල් සේවාවන් My SLT ඇප් එක හරහා කරගන්න.
In your headlines tonight, in the absence, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa no longer in Sri Lanka. Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe as acting president orders to impose curfew, emergency laws and to arrest for unruly behaviour. Restore normalcy. Acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe names committee comprising military and police chiefs to restore the peace. Says Sri Lanka is facing a fascist threat. Get the house in order. Military chiefs tell politicians to meet, decide and revert future course of political action. Holding ground. Protesters refuse to leave Prime Minister's office. Bar Association asks protesters to hand over Prime Minister's house to authorities. All this and much more coming up tonight. This Wednesday, the 13th of July, 2022.
නව ලයිෆ් බොයි කොහොම ස්වභාවික කොහොම සාරයෙන් සමග හානිකර පැරබන් රහිතයි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Joining me tonight on First at 9. Let's take a look at the top stories making news tonight. In a new turn of events in Sri Lanka, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe was today appointed as acting president of Sri Lanka upon President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's departure to the Maldives in the early hours of the day. According to Speaker of Parliament Mahindayapa Abewardana, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had informed him that he will be resigning from his post as announced during the day. Following the resignation, Parliament is expected to vote a new president on the 20th of July. Nominations will be accepted on the 18th of this month. A day much looked forward to by protesters who stormed Colombo on Saturday, the 9th of July, as they were awaiting an official announcement of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's resignation as promised by him. But it was confirmed earlier today that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa had left the island on a military jet during the early hours of the day to the Maldives. The aircraft, which flew both the head of state and the First Lady, landed in the Maldivian capital Malé at 3 a.m. Sri Lankan time. Issuing a communique, the Sri Lanka Air Force confirmed that a military plane was given to the president to depart for the Maldives. The statement read, quote, in accordance with the powers vested in an executive president by the Constitution of Sri Lanka, at the request of the existing government, subject to the full approval of the Ministry of Defence and subject to immigration, customs and all other laws at the Katunayake International Airport, an Air Force plane was given in the early morning of the 13th for the President and the First Lady, along with 2 bodyguards, to leave the Katunayake International Airport for the Maldives, unquote. Meanwhile, media reports emerged that former Finance Minister Basil Rajapaksa, who was refused to be served at the Silk Route VIP lounge of Bandaranaike International Airport when he arrived at the airport to leave for Washington via Dubai yesterday, has fled the country today to the United States. Media reports also circulated claiming that India helped both the president and his former finance minister to flee to the Maldives and to the United States. The Indian High Commission in Colombo was quick to take to Twitter to refute the reports, stating that he categorically denied the baseless and speculative media reports that India facilitated the travel of the president and Basil Rajapaksa out of Sri Lanka. The tweet by the Indian envoy read, quote, it is reiterated that India will continue to support the people of Sri Lanka, unquote. In this backdrop, Speaker of Parliament Mahindayapa Abewardana, who is in charge of officially issuing statements of the President, said that President Gotabaya Rajapaksa appointed Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe as acting president in his absence.
ආණ්ඩුක්‍රම ව්‍යවස්ථාවේ 37 එක වගන්තියේ යටතේ අතිගරු ජනාධිපති ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මහතා දිවයිනෙන් බැහැරව සිටින බැවින් එම ධූරයේ කටයුතු රාජකාරී ආවරණය කිරීම සඳහා අග්‍රාමාත්‍ය රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ මැතිතුමා පත් කළ බව මට දන්වා සිටියා.
As per Article 37, the Speaker also gave an update pertaining to the resignation letter that was expected from the President today.
දැනට දිවයිනෙන් බැහැරව සිටින අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා මීට සුළු මොහොතකට පෙර මාහා දුරකථනයෙන් සම්බන්ධ වී එතුමා මීට පෙර ප්‍රකාශ කළ පරිදි අද දින තම දුරයෙන් ඉල්ලා අස්වන බවත් ඒ සම්බන්ධයෙන් වන ලිපිය නිල වශයෙන් අද දිනය තුල මාහට ලැබීමට සලස්වන බවත් මට ප්‍රකාශ කරන ලෙස දන්වන ලදී. ඒ අනුව අපි පාර්ලිමේන්තුව තුල සැලසුම් කළ වැඩපිළිවෙල මේ මාස 20 වෙනි දින නව ජනාධිපතිවරයෙක් පත් කර ගැනීමෙන් පසු අවසාන වෙනවා. එබැවින් මේ පිළිබඳ කිසිදු සැකයක් තබා නොගන්නා ලෙසත් සාමකාමීව කටයුතු කරන ලෙස මා සියලුම ජනතාවගෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිමි.
Acting President Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe says Sri Lanka is facing a fascist threat that needs to be eliminated immediately. The newly appointed acting president said this, announcing a state of emergency in the country and curfew in the western province after hundreds of protesters took control of the Prime Minister's office. In a video statement released today, Ranil Wickremesinghe said he appointed a committee comprising Chief of Defence Staff, commanders of the 3 armed forces and the Inspector General of Police to enforce the curfew and state of emergency and to bring the situation back to normal.
ඊයේ ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ ජනාධිපතිතුමා රටින් පිට වෙලා ගියා. කතානායකතුමාට ඉල්ලා අස්වීමේ ලිපිය දෙනවා කිව්වා. මටත් දැනුම් දුන්නා. එතුමා පිට වී යන බවට. ඒ අවස්ථාවේදී පුදුම වුණේ ලැබිලා තිබුණ සමහර තොරතුරු ගැන බුද්ධ්‍යංශයට. ඔය අරගලයේ හිටපු සමහර කණ්ඩායම් සංවිධානය කරලා තිබුණා. අගමැති කාර්යාලය අල්ලන්න ඒ වගේම ජනාධිපතිතුමාට මාලදිවයිනට යන්න ගුවන් යානයක් දුන්නේ නිසා ගුවන් හමුදාපතිතුමාගේ ගෙදර වට කරන්න ඒකම යුද්ධ හමුදාපතිතුමාගේ නාවික හමුදාපතිතුමාගේ ගෙවල් වට කරන්නට කියලා තීරණය කළා තිබුණා. ඒ බැලුවේ මේ රටේ බලය එතනින් ලබා ගන්න. ඒ අයට මේ අගමැති කාර්යාලයට යන්න කිසිම හේතුවක් නැහැ. ඒ අයට උමන වෙලා තියෙන්නේ නීතියානුකූලව මම වැඩ බලන ජනාධිපති වෙලා කතානායකතුමා එක්ක එකතු වෙලා මේ රටේ අලුත් ජනාධිපතිවරයෙක් තෝරන එක නවත්තන්න ඒ අයට ඕන වෙලා තියෙන්නේ තමන්ගේ අපේක්ෂා තෝරගන්න. සමහරු කියලා තියෙනවා රටේ ව්‍යවස්ථාව වැඩක් නැහැ, පාර්ලිමේන්තු වැඩක් නැහැ, අපි කියන දේ කරන්න කියලා. අපේ ව්‍යවස්ථාව ඉරලා දාන්න බෑ. එහෙනම් ඒක ව්‍යවස්ථා විරෝධී වැඩ කටයුත්තක්. මේ රටේ ෆැසිස්වාදී පතුරවන්න ඉන්නේ. ඒකට අපේ සමහර සම්ප්‍රදායික දේශපාලන එකතු වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ නිසා අද ඇතුනේ තත්වයේදී ආරක්ෂා අංශය මට උපදෙස් දුන්නා හදිසි නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න කියලා, ඇඳිරි නීතිය ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න කියලා. මේ ෆැසිස්වාදී තර්ජනය අපි නැති කරන්න ඕනේ. ජනාධිපති මන්දිරය, එළිගහගම් මන්දිරය, ජනාධිපති කාර්යාලය අල්ලගෙන මේවායේ තියෙන ලිපිගොනු නැති කරන්න ඉඩ දෙන්න බෑ. ඒ නිසා හදිසි නීතිය යොදවලා, ඇඳිරි නීතිය යොදවලා මේ තත්ත්වය ආපහු සාමාන්‍ය තත්ත්වයට ගන්න කියලා මම ආරක්ෂා අංශයට උපදෙස් දීලා තියෙනවා. ඒකට දේශපාලන ඇඟිලි ගැහිමක් නැහැ. මේ ඔබේ අනාගතය. නීතිය සාමය ආරක්ෂා කරගෙන යන්න තියෙන. ඒ නිසා ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාවයි පොලිසියටයි සම්පූර්ණ සහයෝගය ලබා දෙන්න කියලා මම ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
Sri Lanka's military and police had meanwhile told political authorities to meet immediately to discuss the future course of action until a new president is appointed. Speaking during a special media briefing, Chief of Defence Staff General Shavendra Silva said commanders of Sri Lanka's 3 armed forces and the Inspector General of Police requested the Speaker to convene a party leaders meeting and to revert on the political decisions they intend to implement. The Chief of Defence Staff, who was flanked by the Chiefs of Sri Lanka Army, Air Force and Navy and the police, urged the public to cooperate in maintaining the peace.
ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාව සහ ශ්‍රී ලංකා පොලිසිය මේ දක්වා පවතින ව්‍යවස්ථාවට අනුව කටයුතු කරනු ලැබුවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම අද දිනේදී කතානායකතුමා අප වෙස පවසා සිටිනු ලැබුවා. අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ ඉල්ලා අස්වීම අද දිනේදී සිදු වන බවට එතුමා විසින් අපට තහවුරු කරනු ලැබුවා. අනුව විශේෂයෙන්ම ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාපතිවරුණුත් පොලිස්පතිතුමත් කතානායකවරයාගෙන් ඉල්ලීමක් කරනු ලැබුවා. සියලුම පක්ෂ නායකයන්ගේ රැස්වීමක් ඇඳවා එහිදී දේශපාලනය වශයෙන් ඉදිරි ජනාධිපතිතුමා පත් කරගන්නා තුරු කාල සීමාවේ කරන ලබන ක්‍රියාමාර්ග පිළිබඳව පැහැදිලි කිරීමක් කරලා දේශපාලන වශයෙන් ගනු ලබන තීරණ අප වෙත දැනුම් දෙන ලෙස මේ අනුව අපේ රටේ ජනතාවගෙන් විශේෂයෙන්ම තරුණ ජනතාවගෙමුත් අපි අපි විශේෂයෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා ඊළඟ ජනාධිපතිතුමා පත්වන තුරු ඉතාමත්ම සාමකාමීව රටේ සාමය පවත්වාගෙන යාම සඳහා ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාව සහ ශ්‍රී ලංකා පොලිසියට සහයෝගය ලබා දෙන්න. ඒ වගේම පෞද්ගලික හෝ රජයේ දේපල විනාශ නොකර මේ ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාවට සහ පොලිසියට රටේ සාමය පවත්වාගෙන යාමට ඔබගේ සියලුම ශ්‍රී ලංකා වාසී ආදරණීය ජනතාවගෙන් අපි ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා අපට සහයෝගය ලබා දෙන්නට කියලා.
Now, Acting President Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe has informed Speaker Mahinda Yapa Abhiwardena to nominate a Prime Minister who is acceptable to both the government and opposition. Accordingly, the ruling party and the opposition must form an all-party government. On Monday, the Prime Minister held a meeting with the members of the Cabinet at the Prime Minister's office. All ministers who participated at this meeting were of the opinion that as soon as there is an agreement on forming an all-party government, they will hand over responsibilities to the new government. Earlier today, protesters stormed the Prime Minister's office in Colombo and took control of it, demanding the resignation of Ranil Wickremesinghe. Despite a curfew enforced in the Western Province and state of emergency declared, a group of protesters also entered the state-owned Sri Lanka Rupavahini Corporation. Following the announcement of Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe being appointed acting president upon President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's departure to the Maldives, protesters demonstrated outside the Prime Minister's office in Colombo, demanding the resignation of Ranil Wickremesinghe. With that being the case, Prime Minister Wickremesinghe, in his capacity as acting president, declared a curfew in the Western Province and an island-wide state of emergency to control the situation. As acting president, he has also ordered the security forces to arrest those engaged in unruly behavior and to take into custody vehicles they travel in. Meanwhile, water cannons and tear gas were fired at protesters outside the Prime Minister's office to control the tense situation. Multiple rounds of tear gas and water cannons were fired at protesters to prevent them from entering the PM's office. Shots were also fired to the sky. Despite efforts by police, the protesters forced into the Prime Minister's office. 39 persons were injured due to the tense situation at the PM's office. They have been admitted to the National Hospital in Colombo. Meanwhile, some of the protesters also arrived at the Sri Lanka Rupavahini Corporation and staged a demonstration there. Later, they entered the premises. Following talks between several protesters and the chairman of Rupavahini Corporation, the protesters were given an opportunity to sit for a live discussion.
After
the live program, the management temporarily suspended telecasts on the channel. The independent television network too took steps to temporarily suspend their telecasts in this backdrop. The Bar Association of Sri Lanka says it is deeply disturbed at the occupation of the Prime Minister's office in Flower Road by protesting crowds and called upon them to return the premises to authorities immediately. The BSL says that it will continue to uphold the rights of peaceful protests but does not support a situation of lawlessness or anarchy which is unconstitutional. The association said that it is necessary at this time for the Speaker, the Prime Minister and leaders of all political parties in Parliament and the citizens to understand the fragile situation of the nation and to act with utmost responsibility and with a sense of sacrifice in the best interests of the country. The BSL says it is also incumbent on them to act in good faith and to prevent the creation of a situation that could lead to the breakdown of the rule of law. The Bar Association of Sri Lanka appealed to the people, especially those engaged in protests, to remain calm and to leave room for the peaceful transition of power through the political leaders of this country that they have promised. And the protesters continue to occupy the three main buildings in Colombo: the President's House, the Presidential Secretariat and the Prime Minister's office, or rather the Prime Minister's official residence, Temple Trees, calling for resignations. The members of the clergy, meanwhile, appealed for peace and requested all parties to act with restraint, warning that external forces could intervene in the country's internal affairs during this vulnerable situation. They also requested protesters to not let the victories won be ridiculed before the international community.
අපි මේ දක්වා අරගල බිමේ අහිංසාවාදී අරගලයක් කරගෙන ආවේ ඒ නිසා තමයි ආගමික නායකත්වයේ වශයෙන් අප හැම දෙනාගේමත් ආදරයේ ගෞරවය ඔබේ අරගලයට යොමු වුණේ. ඒ නිසා ඒ සාමකාමී අරගලයේ ගෞරවය ඉදිරියටත් රැකගන්න පෞද්ගලික දේපළවලට රාජ්‍ය දේපළවලට යම් අලාභයක් හානියක් කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා නම් ඒක සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ඉවත් කරගන්න මේකෙන් වලකින්න මෙවැනි දෙයට ඉදිරිපත් වෙන්න එපා. එහි ප්‍රතිඵලය අතිශයින්ම භයානක විය හැකියි. අපි කිසියෙක් බාර ගන්න පිළිගන්න ප්‍රතිඵලයක් නෙවෙයි ඒක. අපි මේ පැය කීපේ ඉතාමත් ඉවසීමෙන් කටයුතු කරමු. ඊළඟ පියවරට අපි සාවධානව පියවර තබමු. ත්‍රස්තවාදී කටයුත්තකට කිසිවෙක් යොමු වෙන්න එපා.
දැන් නැතිවෙමින් පවතින නොසන්සුන්තාවය මම දකින්නේ ඊටමත් බුද්ධිමත්ව සුපරීක්ෂාකාරීව සහ සංයමයෙන්ද අවහිංසාවාදීව සහ සියලු ආකාර ප්‍රචණ්ඩ ක්‍රියාවලින් වැළකී මෙම කුමන්ත්‍රණකාරී බලවේගවල අතකොළුවක් නොවීමටත් ඒවාට ගොදුරු වී ලබාගත් සුවිශේෂී ජයග්‍රහණය සමස්ත ලෝක ප්‍රජාව ඉදිරියේ හැල්ලු වීමටත් ඉඩ නොදෙමු කියා මම ඊතා ඕනෑකමින් ඔබ සියලු දෙනාගෙන්ම ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා. එබැවින් කලහකාරී නොවි, කලබල නොවි, කිසිදු ආකාර ප්‍රකෝප කිරීමකට ඉඩ නොදී ඉදිරි දින කීපය ඊතා බුද්ධිමත්ව සහ වගකීමෙන් ක්‍රියා කරමින් රටේ දේශපාලන ස්ථාවරත්වය ජනතාවට පැහැදිලි කිරීමට කතානායකතුමා ඉදිරිපත් වන තුරු අපි ඊතා සංසුන්ව ක්‍රියා කරමුයි කියා ඊතා ඕනෑකමින් මම සියලු දෙනාගෙන්ම ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
US inflation increases to its highest in more than 40 years. Details after this break.
3.
Welcome back to the news. Prices in the US are rising as their fastest rate for more than 40 years due to petrol and food costs remaining high. Latest figures showed inflation in the United States hit 9.1% in the 12 months to June and increased by 1.3% from May alone. The Labor Department has said that the US inflation rate is now at its highest level since November 1981, having risen from 8.6% in May. US petrol prices hit record highs last month, averaging about $5 per gallon. It has led to predictions that the US Central Bank will hike interest rates further later this month. There had been hope that a shift in spending from goods to services would help good or cool inflation, but high competition for workers has led to higher averages and wages, which have fueled further price rises. Now, the euro today fell below the US dollar for the first time in nearly 20 years as the war in Ukraine pushed the single currency down. A single euro bought US dollars 0.998 on the foreign exchange market, down by 0.4% in the day's trading. The euro has fallen almost 12% against the US dollar since the start of the year. The single currency has been worth more than the dollar for most of its history. It lagged below the dollar in the years following the currency's launch in year 1999, but the last time it traded below the dollar was December 2002, less than a year after euro notes and coins were introduced for the first time. The dollar has also been strong in recent months, buoyed by US central banks raising interest rates and investors seeking the safe haven of dollar assets in times of global turmoil. Wall Street's main indexes slid after hotter than expected inflation data fanned fears that the Federal Reserve might take a more aggressive stance on interest rate hikes, potentially tipping the economy into a recession. Surging prices globally are driving central banks to raise borrowing costs this year, triggering concerns that a reversal of decades-long easy money policies could lead to a sharp economic downturn. Germany's DAX in the meantime and Italy's FTSE MIB were both down over 12% earlier on. London's FTSE was not far behind, while the euro teetered at 1.0025 as gas and oil prices rose again. Copper, which is attuned to global growth, had hit a 20-month low too. UK economic growth data delivered an unexpected rise, but investors were far more focused on whether US inflation numbers later show it pushing towards 9%, which would be in news just in, police fired tear gas and used water cannons to disperse protesters in front of the Speaker's official residence near Parliament. According to our AdaDerana reporter, a large group of people were engaged in protests outside the Speaker's house, while police had used tear gas and water cannons to disperse them as they attempted to breach police barricades. Now, police had previously fired tear gas to disperse a group of protesters at Puldua Junction in Battaramulla near the entry road to Parliament. Welcome back to the news. We take you to world news very quickly. A US destroyer sailed near the disputed Parcel Islands in the South China Sea today, drawing an angry reaction from Beijing, which said its military had driven away the ship after it illegally entered territorial waters. The United States regularly carries out what it calls freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, challenging what it says are restrictions on innocent passage imposed by China and other claimants. Monday marked the 6th anniversary of a ruling by an international tribunal that invalidated China's sweeping claims to the South China Sea, a conduit for about $3 trillion worth of shipborne trade each year. China says China has never accepted the ruling. The US Navy said the destroyer USS Benfold asserted navigational rights and freedoms in the South China Sea near the Parcel Islands, consistent with international law. China says it does not impede freedom of navigation or overflight, accusing the United States of deliberately provoking tensions. The People's Liberation Army's Southern Theater Command said the US ship's action seriously violated China's sovereignty and security by illegally entering China's territorial waters around the parcels, which are also claimed by Vietnam and Taiwan. Now, US President Joe Biden has arrived in Israel at the start of a landmark regional tour, which will include a controversial visit to Saudi Arabia. It is his first trip to the Middle East since taking office. Biden will also meet the Palestinian president, as well as Israel and Saudi leaders. Palestinians have expressed frustration that the US has not done more for them since his presidency began in 2021. But the main focus will be on the Saudi trips due to tensions over human rights. Biden has faced criticism over his planned meeting on Saturday with the kingdom's de facto leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who was accused by US intelligence agencies of approving the murder of Saudi dissident journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Turkey in year 2018. The prince denied the allegations, and Saudi prosecutors blamed rogue Saudi agents. And that's all on the news tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow at the same time. Until then, take care. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.